Okay, here we go. I'm Rachel Wagon, for whoever has my paper and has to take notes. And today I will be arguing on why digital notes are more efficient than handwritten notes inside a classroom setting. How many of you use a tablet taking notes, computer, this in here in general, or do you all take handwritten notes? Okay, we got one. Okay. So I was just curious in general because I know that we couldn't do a survey earlier. I will be arguing why these digital notes are more efficient because they are convenient and organized, and I decided to keep this simple for the sake of everyone's understanding. So, how are digital notes convenient, right? Okay, well, they can be easily integrated in the classroom. How many of you have online assignments? How many of you have to have internet access to do these assignments? Would you say it's easier if you had your online notes to pull up next to these assignments to look at the class and then insert it in their assignment? Would you think it's easier than looking at your paper and then inserting? Well, Stoltzfus, who is a chemistry lecturer in Ohio, this was actually in, I believe, 2012. He says 5 years from now, when young students come into college, the expectation is going to be a lot different than it is now. They'll be used to using tablets in middle and high school. We have to be the ones that are pushing the limits. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but I didn't have tablets in high school and middle school, so maybe he was referencing two private schools, and in Riverside County, St. Catherine's and St. Edward's, which are both private schools in that county area, use tablets. They provide it. When you go to that high school, another private school in Riverside County, Notre Dame, I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it, they use tablets, however they are not provided. They are required by the students to bring their own. Digital notes, by having a laptop or computer in your classroom, can also be interactive notes. There are apps that help students take notes inside a classroom, help formatting, help lay it out. An app that you can find on the App Store today would be Notability. It is an app that records while you take notes. Of course, this would present the issue of making sure that you have the professor's permission before recording. While you take these notes and it's recording, you're actually able to go back later and reflect. And when you go back to check these notes out, when you log into your account, when you pull them up, if I have like 5 pages of notes, right? I can scroll to page 4 where whatever topic may be, I can click on my notes and it will pull up the point and the lecture of where I recorded. So I am now listening to my professor when I took those notes. This is an example of how digital notes can be interactive. Digital notes are convenient because they can also save time. They say, I have here from a research article that I got from our public library online, the Sage Pub. You can look it up if you're interested. It is called Comparing Memory for Homework or Typing. It is a research article from 5+ authors, so I'm sorry I do not have everyone's credibility background check. But from table 1, means and SD for experimental conditions. This is for recalling the information they have typed versus handwriting. The mean of remembering from handwriting was a 2.0, typing 2 also. I'm so sorry, this is the wrong one. This is the right one, also from Sage Pub though. The use of digital technologies in the classroom, and this is relevance to field. It was the percentage of effectiveness for the instructor and the student. So if you're an engineering major, the effectiveness for an instructor is 64% having an online, being able to interact with the student. And for the student, it was a 73%. For business, it was 63% for their instructor, 66% for the student. For education, 53% for the instructor and 46% for student. Social sciences out there, 51% for the instructor, 55% for the student. Humanities, 43%. student 37%, physical sciences and math 40% for the instructor, 61% for students. Life sciences 29%, 55% for student. And for fine arts, for the students 47%. I wanted to use the statistic because I know we have a broad amount of majors in this classroom. I know I also don't have a lot of time. For digital notes, for organizational purposes, you're able to duplicate and edit your notes accordingly. You can write or type them depending if you have an interactive Surface Top. And if you, let's say, lose your notes, as long as they're saved on your computer, you can pull up a search tab, pull it up, type it in, and you have your notes ready and available for you to study. If you lose it on paper, that's a little more difficult. Hopefully you have a phone number for someone from your class to pull them up before the final and midterm. And if anything, if you guys are able to remember from how digital notes can be more efficient than handwriting, I would just like you guys to know that they can be convenient. We do have assignments that require typing. It makes handwriting legible when you are typing your notes. And you're able to stay more organized for your classes, no matter what your major is. Thank you for your time.
All right, Rich, I'm going to point out something that I have to do on a regular basis in class, and it's not a big deal, but it's something that you want to watch out for. You use the word why and how in a couple of places, and it makes it sound like your speech is an informative speech rather than a argumentative speech. You know, I'm going to explain to you why digital note-taking is more effective. Well, that seems like it's a fait accompli as opposed to an argument that it is more effective. I'm going to explain why it's effective. It's a presumptive in this particular situation, and so it sounds like you're going to give me an informative speech, and you do that in a couple of places. When you phrase things like a question in some of those circumstances, it undermines the notion that you are making a declaration of what your position is, and you need to do that more consistently. I did have a pretty good idea what your proposition was. The secondary points seem to sort of run together. There's convenience, there's organization, and you're going to explain how they can be integrated. We're back to that question sort of thing, so I think that that's a little bit problematic. That's as close as we got to an organizational structure in the speech. After that, things have a tendency to run together. You need to be a little bit more distinctive in talking about those things. So the convenience factor, for instance, I don't know how we measure convenience and turn it into an objective term as opposed to a value-based term. The amount of time that we would save, the amount of money, the accessibility, I think those would all be things that could be useful there. But we don't really have any data on that. The closest you get to something like that is this hypothetical based on the app that you use, Notability, which sounds like it has a lot of fine qualities to it, but there's no information that shows that you are doing better in your classes, for instance, because you use Notability than somebody who isn't using that sort of thing, except that you've got your own experience. I find it so much better for me, that sort of thing. And that's not really very strong data to make an inference that says this kind of note-taking has a beneficial impact. You had one section where you started referring to a whole bunch of comparative statistics, but it was not clear what any of those comparative statistics meant. It was like, in business it's 43% for the students, 52% for the instructors. I'm going, 42% of what? They hold on to 42% more information, or the instructors feel 42% more satisfied. I didn't know what any of those numbers meant, and it goes on for a long time on a whole bunch of them. So the fact that you've got the statistics there is not necessarily useless, but it isn't helping if you don't tell us what those statistics mean and what they're based on, and I just couldn't quite figure that out. I can see a lot of potential advantages to digital note-taking, and we talked about this a little bit when you came to talk to me about this. I think that there is stuff here that is probably important and useful, but you've yourself mentioned the schools that use tablets, but where's the data that says that those schools do a better job? I didn't see any of that information. You went into the effort to tell me that, well, some of the private schools, they supply it, 2 of them supply it, 1 of them doesn't, and I'm going, and so your point is, that how does that show that one system works more effectively or produces better results or solves problems more effectively? And that's the stuff that's missing from your argument. And that's really what your argument's about in the long run. So if we don't have that data, it's hard to accept the conclusion that you're talking about. Like I said, I think that we end up hearing a lot more about some theory concerning integrated digital material and our need to have access to that sort of thing. What was strange to me was at one point you talked about the professor in Ohio who is anticipating in 2012 that 5 years from now, which by the way is now a year and a half ago, things are going to be dramatically different because people are going to need this. And then you said, well, I didn't have this kind of stuff, so wait a second. So it's coming, but it hasn't arrived yet, and now you're kind of telling me that we don't have any proof about how it works because we don't have that data. That's backwards from the way your argument ought to be working. Your argument ought to be saying, he said this is coming, and here it is in 2018, and compared to 2012, when he was making this argument, we can see that there is 41% penetration of tablets in elementary schools, 90% penetration in high schools and colleges, and that grades have gone up by 15% or graduation rates are higher or something like that. I'm looking for any kind of thing, or even just even if we don't have the statistical information, teachers seem to think that it's working better, or researchers have observed, and here's some examples where we know some students have done better. We need something like that to kind of advance your argument, and that's mostly what's missing. All right, thank you.